Ah, yes, the dream of owning a twisted bow. You sold your entire bank to have this prized possession. Wait, you sold your entire bank? Today we begin a solo CM journey where we've pieced together rags and remnants of your bank and find out if we sold out for the twisted bow rebuild too soon, or if we can get the job done. In order to afford something as powerful as the twisted bow, naturally we're going to have to make some sacrifices, particularly in the other two attack styles being melee and mage. So let's take a look at what we're wearing and what we could still afford for those styles respectively. Well, first things first, gone is the bandage chestplate or even the blood moon. In its place, we have the fighter torso, something that costs no GP actually. What it does cost you, however, is perhaps a little bit of your sanity doing barbarian assault. Now, when it comes to being on a budget, you have to be smart. So there are some items in here that we are going to be using for multiple attack styles. So we're just going to be holding on to the Helm of Native's Knot, and we're going to be using the Amulet of Glory, and the Barrow's Gloves are also going to serve a purpose for all three attack styles respectively. Of course, the Dragon Boots are melee boots, but honestly, if you don't have your hands on something like the Avernic Treads, which we definitely cannot afford because of our situation, Dragon Boots are going to be more than enough. You do want to wear melee boots. Now, a Dragon Hunter Lance is usually pretty crucial if you want to be doing chambers, but obviously we can't afford that. I don't know how much it is right now, but it's very expensive and definitely something we couldn't afford. So we do have the trusty old Abyssal Whip. There is one big exception here though in our setup, and that's the Avernic Defender. No, it was definitely not because I didn't want to grind out another Dragon Defender just for this video. When it comes to the ring slot, my game plan was to wear the Lightbearer ring because honestly, that's more beneficial if you're thinking about only using one ring. However, a Berserker ring is currently 3 mil, but a Lightbearer is like 5.5 mil. Let's take a look at our mage gear. When it comes to the mage gear, we put all our GP into the trident. This is going to be very, very important for the actual Olm fight, but everything else, well, the mage cape came free, obviously. Book of the Dead came free, but we did have to shell out for the Mystic Robe top and bottoms. The armor to pair up with our ever powerful twisted bow is simply black dragon hide. Nope, we couldn't even afford God D-hide in the budget. Oh, and on top of that, we don't even have dragon arrows. Instead, we got rune arrows from LMS. For our DPS spec weapon, we have the trusty dragon dagger. This bad boy costs a whopping 18k GP. And then as for our defense reduction, well, we can't afford an Elder Maw. And we can't even afford a Dragon Warhammer either. So our only option is the Bone Dagger. Okay, we do have a Dragon Pickaxe still, and this is mostly because I have like 7 of these bad boys in my bank and 0 rune pickaxes. Let's just insert a joke here about the state of the wilderness and the bot situation and how these Dragon Pickaxes aren't even worth anything anymore. Having stamina for the Olm fight is very, very important, so I did probably go overboard having 2 full extended stamina potions. But again, I cannot stress enough, having stamina for the fight is incredibly important. Also, with this inventory setup, I mean, we just have so much space for food and whatnot, so why not? Alright, let's begin the raid. How is the Abyssal Whip gonna do at Tecton? Well, let's see if this Bone Dagger will do anything with Tecton. First hit is always guaranteed, although that mechanic to the Bone Dagger is a little redundant here at Tecton, as your first spec... Wait, actually, now that I think about it, Tecton guarantees that your first hammer always hits. Does it always guarantee the Bone Dagger hits? Or like, what happens if you BGS, actually? You know what? Does anybody know? Do let me know down in the comment section. Is the specific mechanic at Tecton specifically a hammer, or is it any special weapon or any first hit? That's something I don't actually know, because typically, why would you not send a Dragon Warhammer or an Elder Maw spec? Alright, this is actually going to be a little weird for me, this 4-tick Tecton running method, because I've been using a 5-tick weapon for so long, and if we weren't kind of just doing a meme run here, something on a budget would be the Osmumtum's Fang for sure, which probably costs about like anywhere between 10 to 20 mil. Honestly, not too bad. All right, now that we have the general gist of Tecton, and you can see after one down, we did like maybe a little over 50 damage, but it did heal up at the anvil, obviously. Unfortunately, in post-edit here, we are going to have to speed this up because, well, you can see for yourself. In a regular Chambers of Xeric run, a whip is serviceable, but in a challenge mode where everything is so much tankier, and we didn't even afford ourselves the Dragon Warhammer for defense reduction, yeah, this was a little bit of an oversight by me. Well, I wanted to see if I could get this done anyways, and I started throwing in Dragon Dagger specs, as you can see there, just to do what I can with all the resources I had available. And after nearly 7 minutes, can we get the job done here? Oh, the whip absolutely popped off at the end. A 650 Tecton. Alright, you know what? It could have been worse. We really started hitting towards the end there. Maybe we just got unlucky at the start. I don't know. I didn't exactly DPS check any of this, you know? It could be really, really bad. And I mean, it was really, really bad. Anyways, though, moving on to Crab Room. Crab Room plays out exactly the same, luckily. You know, we just have to hit them and not splash. In fact, is it even actually possible to splash on these crabs anymore? I have no idea, really. But you know what? This is something I didn't think about. When you have your hands on a Dragon Warhammer or an Elder Maw, it also doubles as a hammer for the Crab Room. But we don't have any of that, so we actually have to pick up that hammer that's available in this room, and this is real janky. The thing about Crab Room is when you mess up, it can really go wrong. It either goes perfectly or it goes really wrong. Honestly, no in between. And just an extra step of having to right-click smash these crabs is causing a bit of trouble, to say the least. And there's actually a bit of a delay. It's really weird. Okay, we just got to deal with this crystal and then one more. Those crabs are about to move though, which could be annoying. Smash that into place, and this is not ideal. We got those crabs coming along with us. Let me try to oh, okay, yeah, that weird delay. It doesn't smash right away. It's like a whole process. So a crab room that should take about 1 minute is going to take well longer than that. I'm not really sure what the time in this room is going to be. Let's find out. A 151. Okay. Speaking of the time, I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to make the time in terms of the challenge mode time in which you can get your roll for dust and kits. But other than that, I'm really not sure what kind of time we're going to end up with. We're going to be scavenging here like usual, and I think I might pick up a few extra supplies for brews and restores, because I'm thinking ahead here at Vanguards, where we're going to be taking a lot of damage, so we're going to need the extra brews. And Ulm itself, obviously, but Vanguards, we're probably going to take a lot of damage, just because that room is going to take much longer than we usually would. And when it comes to prayer, I'm thinking of Vespula. That is probably going to be a massive, massive prayer drain. I mean, we could always be a little bit more patient and wait on our prayer in hands, but who wants to do that? And these scavs aren't really paying out right now. They're being stingy. I guess the silver lining here is we're not using anything that has expensive charges to farm scavs. Typically in a max setup, we'd be blasting away with our shadow, so that's soul and chaos runes right there. Alright, we have everything we need. We have more planks than we need even. We're going to be able to build the largest chest. And yeah, same thing with the storage unit actually. You got to make sure you have that hammer on you. Otherwise, if you don't have a Dragon Warhammer or an Elder Maw, yeah, you're not going to be able to make this chest. Although I will say the scabs do drop hammers though. That's something we had to consider way, way back in the day in Chambers of Xeric before all the quality of life changes. Alright, let's begin getting these kindling, and our inventory situation, typically right here, I'd be dropping potions and I'd have to pick them back up next to the tinderbox. But our inventory situation is so different. We barely have any gear that we brought into the raid, so ample inventory space. Let's get 2 inventories into the brazier. That's 1 inventory right there. I feel like I mention this every time at Ice Demon, but the way I do Ice Demon is 2 full inventories, so sets of 28 kindling at 2 separate braziers, and then I chop as much as I can until Ice Demon is down to about 35%. That's just to give me enough time to re-gear, and it's also like a nice balance in points and how quickly Ice Demon pops. So yeah, well, let's work on that 3rd inventory, whatever we can get. Sometimes if I'm very, very lucky, I actually get another 28. Pretty good chops right here, actually. 20, 22. We might be able to get 28? No, not quite. We didn't get a big chop at the end there. That's okay, though. Alright, let's go ahead and re-gear. Now, inventory management in solo CMs, or just CMs in general, even in team scales, inventory management is very, very important. And the thing about these raids is that when your inventory changes slightly, even if it's just one item placed somewhere else, or maybe you're missing some items that you usually have, it can really throw you off. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge in this raid, along with just having some absolutely scuffed gear. Now, we're going to be T-bowing Ice Demon because we didn't even bring an Emberlight or an Arclight, because obviously we can't afford a Tormented Synapse. And, you know, picture this. Imagine you did have an Emberlight, but you dismantled it to sell your Tormented Synapse. Imagine that. And as such, you don't have any shards for your Arclight, so scrap that idea. And Burning Claws, those bad boys cost like 4 mil, so we're not spending 4 mil on that. So for Ice Demon, we're just going to be doing the good old-fashioned way before Ice Demon was even weak to Demon Bane, and that's the T-bow. Now this specific method we're doing is really convenient because you don't need to use overheads, and you don't need to use run energy either. That's another change from, well, relatively recent, right? Run energy situations are just a lot better these days. Before, it was much more of a problem and you really had to manage it, and this was one way you would manage it. Now these days, if you're running chambers and you still don't have Demon Bane, or you're not bringing it into your setup for whatever reason, a Twisted Bow or a Shadow are viable methods to do Ice Demon, and even the Bofa and the Fang. But the Shadow, it being 5-tick just like the Twisted Bow, you can use this exact same method that I'm doing now. But yeah, with no Demon Bane weaponry, this is taking quite a bit longer. Especially with Burning Claws, if you just dump all your specs more times than not, you're going to get this job done in a matter of a couple of seconds, but we're almost done here. You know what? We're going to go ahead and pick up these supplies here because I honestly don't know how this raid is going to go. So maybe I'll need those extra supplies, maybe I won't. I don't know, just in case. Let's head into the Shaman room, and you know what? I gotta say, at Ice Demon, the T-bow wasn't too bad right there. I imagine... I mean, it is the Twisted Bow, it is for the Chambers of Xeric, so... it should be good, despite us using only rune arrows, and we only have black d'hide. We got the Shaman in a safe spot, so nice and easy. Oh, and you know what? The biggest and most powerful thing for our range setup is that we already have Rigor. Without it, our DPS would be abysmal. We've got this Shaman in the safe spot, so we are absolutely chilling right now. And honestly, in this raid in general, we've been chilling. I mean, Tecton did take like 7 minutes, but Tecton can be a bit of a brick wall with or without good gear. So once we got past that, it's been smooth sailing. That's one Shaman down. Let's go pick up the Boochoos. Definitely gonna need that. And I don't see a situation where I would need the other 2 seeds in a solo raid because we still have our overload on us. We're almost done with this room. We got 2 doses that should get us through Vanguards, and then we'll get a whole new set of overload and enhance anyways. This Shaman also falls into place in the safe spot. They're very cooperative on this run, I gotta say. Sometimes they're, well, not so much, you know. They just refuse to jump when you need them to, and then when you don't want them to jump, they end up doing it just because you made one little mistake. That's just seemingly how it always goes, I guess. Alright, we're absolutely nuking that second Shaman. There we go. Let's head on into the prep room. Now, as we set up shop for prepping, I'm thinking ahead at Vanguards, and with all the gear changes we have right now, or rather, the lack of gear we have in general, I'm not really sure what our max hits are. And that's pretty important when it comes to Vanguards, and later down the line in Ulm for P3. I have no idea what my max hits are, but, you know, we're going to be hitting pretty low numbers anyways, so I think it's less of a problem than, say, if we were to upgrade our gear, and then all of a sudden we hit like a whopping 72 or something. Alright, we're just prepping here, nothing too special, gonna do what I normally do, plus a little on top for brews and restores. Just a little bit extra, just in case. Fill up our vials. Yeah, we're gonna be going with 17 juice and 8 mushrooms. My typical prep would involve 13 juice and 8 mushrooms, and that's, those are like good numbers for your inventory. It just like fills out your inventory very nicely. That way you don't really have to do any counting, and you can just rely on how it looks like in your inventory and it'll fill up. But yeah, we're going to make a couple extra brews. I think restores, 8 restores has always been an over prep for me, no matter what setup I'm in. So I think it should be fine even in this setup. I could be wrong, but hopefully not. Keep in mind, we're going to be picking up more resources at Vanguards and Vespula anyways, as well as Vasa in the Muttadile room, but in terms of brews and restores. Make our restores here, that's 8. And then, yeah, even having like 4 extra juice than normal, like I kind of had to think about that for a second there. It's like, what am I doing? It's like, okay, I'm going to have to make some of the brews now so that I have inventory space available. So yeah, we have 12 available inventory space for boot shoes, so I'm going to go ahead and make 2 brews right here. That opens up all the inventory space I need for 12 boot shoes. And then we should be good to go at Vanguards. I'm actually really curious as to how Vanguards is going to go, because obviously our melee and mage setup is very, very weak. And the twisted bow is just going to carry in terms of range. It might even be viable to use the twisted bow on all 3 Vanguards. Maybe not the melee one, but... or maybe not the range Vanguard, which you're supposed to melee. Maybe not that one. Perhaps the blue and the green Vanguards, which are the mage and range Vanguards respectively. It could be viable. Let's sort out our inventory here. I brought in a bunch of prayer potions and karambwans, but honestly, I didn't quite need all of that. I did have to use more prayer than usual, obviously. Went through a good couple of doses to get through Tecton mostly there. Whereas typically, I wouldn't need to bring any prayer at all, but, you know, I had the inventory space, wasn't sure how this raid was going to go, so better to have it than not, right? Alright, let's head into Vanguards, and we're going to begin putting our staff on long range. Let's see what kind of damage we do here. You know, it's not like I haven't done CMs in the past when my Iron Man was lesser geared with a trident and a mystic robe top. But I definitely at least brought an occult. At least the Amulet of Fury, it wasn't quite as scuffed as this, to say the least. So, yeah, this is just another level. We're utilizing our Dragon Dagger here. You know, I'm surprised it actually hit. Obviously, in challenge mode, everything is very, very tanky. Yeah, we're gonna have to put some damage into this melee Vanguard here with our trident. In all seriousness, an occult isn't very expensive for you mainscapers out there, so in a Twisted Bow rebuild, an occult probably is one of the first things you would get, or even just hold on to, right? Like, in a Twisted Bow rebuild, you probably don't have to sell something that's worth, like, what? Like 400k maybe? I'm not even sure how much they're worth, but it's definitely not much. And on that note, I definitely would not start a Twisted Bow rebuild if you can't at least hold on to your Dragon Hunter Lance and afford a Dragon Warhammer. Those are definitely staples to doing this raid. So like Twisted Bow, Trident, honestly a Trident is more than fine. Just don't downgrade to a Trident in the Seas. That is honestly kind of ridiculous. But a Toxic Trident is perfectly fine. I've done hundreds upon hundreds of raids with a Trident. And more specifically, I've done hundreds upon hundreds of solo CMs with the Trident. I did about 800 solo CMs without any mega rares. Obviously, I did have a Bofa as a typical Iron Man setup. But for Mage gear, I did use a Trident. And for melee gear, I used a Fang to get through the rooms, and I did have my hands on the Dragon Hunter Lance. I did, however, start doing regular chambers with a whip, just like we are now. Never done it in ACM, and honestly, I mean, looking back at that Tecton, you could tell I've never done it because, wow, that Tecton was bad with a regular whip. I guess something to consider, which is very cheap these days, is actually the Zamorakian Hasta. It's probably a little bit better than the whip on CM Tecton, considering it does have a crush option. We're actually almost done with the Vanguard room here. Been trying to play it nice and safe, and DPS is a little bit better than I expected. Honestly, I guess I had very low expectations going into this raid. Well, outside of Tecton, I thought it would go a little bit better than that, but I kind of just forgot how tanky Tecton can be, and how OP the Osmumtum's Fang is, if nothing else. Yeah, what's really noticeable is the lack of the Osmumtum's Fang here, because that's like the most budget thing that you could get, which is also still incredibly powerful. Alright, we still have to deal with the melee Vanguard right now. No surprise, as our Mage gear is probably weakest, perhaps? Although, I don't know, the whip, yeah, you know, it's a tough thing. Usually, if you have a more traditional setup with the likes of a Bofa, the Trident, and a Fang, the Trident setup, the Mage setup, is probably going to be your weakest DPS, so that Vanguard's usually going to be up near the end of the fight. But let's go ahead. We got all our supplies, all the brews and restores, a refresh on the Overload and Enhance, and then into the most exciting room right now, Thieving Room. Let's just grab our 30 grubs, not much to it. Looking ahead, it's going to be Vespula, in which we're going to be using our Twisted Bow. Now, obviously, this being Chambers of Xeric, going for a Twisted Bow rebuild is probably the most natural thought process, but using a Shadow for a Chambers-focused rebuild probably isn't too bad either, especially if you plan on doing regular Chambers over Challenge Mode Chambers, because due to the way defenses are and the two weapons and how they function, a Tumikin's Shadow is more times than not actually better than the Twisted Bow in regular raids. However, in challenge mode where the defenses are higher, the Twisted Bow is better. And as it should, honestly, because it's this raid's mega rare after all. It's honestly weird that the Shadow can be better than the Twisted Bow in the very raid that drops the Twisted Bow. Anyways, we got 30 grubs into the trough. Let's just sort out our inventory. Yeah, we're going to need a lot of restores, because there's no telling how long this is going to go, because while we do have the Twisted Bow, the rest of the gear is not so great. Things like the Necklace of Anguish are actually very, very strong. It's not just the Twisted Bow itself. Alright, we got Redemption and Rigor on, and unfortunately I didn't quite start the room correctly, so we're kind of on a time crunch now. That red health bar on the other side of the room, we gotta watch out for that. And to be honest, I don't know how to do this room, Vespula, the quote-unquote correct way. This way we're doing right now, where, I mean, you see 99% of the people, if not 100% of the people do this, and that's simply to attack the Abyssal Portal while proccing Redemption. Yeah, this is the only way I know how to do Vespula, and this is technically not the correct way to do Vespula. And even to this day, I have no idea how to do that other method. I do know it involves feeding the grubs or something, but that's about the extent of my knowledge regarding that. Alright, our DPS is pretty good right now, again. I guess it helps when you enter the raid with really low expectations, again, outside of the exception of Tecton, and everything just, like, it's just better. Like, I'm just surprising myself. I'm like, wow. Speaking of which, I mentioned earlier that I don't know what kind of time we can expect, although I do think we're gonna beat the solo CM time, which is 1 hour and 10 minutes. That is an absolute freebie. I feel like we could probably take a nap and still get that. And honestly, even dating back to when I was first learning solo CMs, which was obviously a struggle, I don't think I ever missed a time. I could be mistaken, but while a few times I have come close to the time, I've never failed it to my knowledge, to my memory. Alright, that's Vespula down. And up next is Tightrope. We're going to be doing Tightrope the normal way. We're just going to be finishing off the Majors and Rangers before crossing the rope for the crystal. So let's make sure we have the brews to survive. And this could be a little brutal, especially when it comes to the Rangers, because our defenses aren't looking too great. I mean, Black D'hide, and then our melee for range defense, yeah, it's like non-existent actually. So yeah, we'll see how this goes, but we do have a lot of brews, and I mean, I guess worst case scenario, we'll just have to make more brews if it comes down to it. But I don't think we will, considering I already accounted for that and made extra brews than usual. Yeah, despite our lack of gear, honestly, the Twisted Bow in combination with Rigor is so strong. And if you're actually doing a rebuild as you continue to attack on gear upgrades, you're probably going to see that power creep really clearly. You know, like the first thing you should probably get is maybe like a Necklace of Anguish. And then that's going to be a major power spike with that alone. Dealing with the Rangers now, yeah, you can see I'm taking quite a bit of damage. But as long as we take our time here and keep our health above 43 or so, we should be good. Oh, we just hit a max hit there. I didn't quite see what it was though, unfortunately. It would be good to know. Alright, now we can cross the rope. Honestly, didn't use too many brews, which is good. We're going to be getting 2 more from Vasa, and then we're going to be getting another one from Muttadile. And assuming Muttadile doesn't absolutely slap us, we should have more than enough supplies. Alright, let's switch into our melee gear, pickaxe equipped, just to have all the inventory available or possible. Let's get out a bunch of brews. I think 3 restores should do the trick here. Typically, I'd bring 2, but understanding that, you know, things are probably going to take a little longer, a 3rd one just in case. But speaking of things taking a little longer, 30 minutes to get to this 3rd floor? I feel like it's comparable to my very early days of running solo CMs in pretty scuffed gear. Again, not quite as scuffed as this. I mean, I did lack a Twisted Bow, but in exchange, I did have the full Bofa crystal setup. And before the quality of life changes here at Chambers, which actually really sped up this raid, by the way, 30 minutes to get to this point is not too bad. These days, it would be considered slow, obviously, but considering our gear situation, yeah, not too bad. I'll definitely take it. Before we started the raid, I touched on the Dragon Pickaxe. I guess a more realistic thing is, well, actually, no. You know, the more I think about it, considering that a Dragon Pickaxe is only worth like 400k now, it's probably not something you would even sell to afford a Twisted Bow. It's like, maybe like, you know, if you're really like, you know, squeezing out the GP and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm 500k short, 400k short, let me just sell the Dragon Pickaxe. But when you're first looking in your bank to sell stuff to afford the Twisted Bow, selling something that's only worth 400k GP is probably not at the top of your priority list. Although, you know, there are other things that are in a similar value that I don't have right now in the setup, like an occult, which is actually very, very powerful, but it just kind of adds to the scuffness, adds to the meminess of this run. We're not doing a true rebuild here, in case you haven't realized. I am an Iron Man. It's not like I actually sold my bank for a Twisted Bow. But it's the idea, it's the concept of doing this. And really, we're asking the question, just how bad can your gear be while still doing a solo CM? Now, so far, we haven't planked yet, and knock on wood, we won't plank in this raid at all. But we'll see what happens at Ohm specifically. Will we run out of supplies? Because obviously, if we run out of supplies right now, we can always get out of dodge and prep again. The death is avoidable. But once we enter Ohm, if we're out of supplies, we're out of supplies. So we'll see what happens then. And let's see if our armor will hold up for the Muttadile room, or maybe if Muttadile chooses to be nice today and not do 10 million damage to me. Honestly, so far so good in this raid right now. However, if you're the one watching right now and thinking to yourself, wow, this is absolutely terrible, well, that's actually good, because this is your sign, this is your indicator to not sell out for a Twisted Bow until either A, you can hold on to just a few more items, like a Dragon Liner Lance and your Dragon Warhammer, or B, you can actually still afford those things and your Twisted Bow. Because right now, in our situation, we're using a Dragon Dagger, an Abyssal Whip, and a Bone Dagger. Speaking of which, I'm not sure if I'm going to be bringing the Bone Dagger or the Dragon Dagger in the Ohm. I want to say probably the Bone Dagger. Now this Vasa, okay, yeah, it is going pretty slowly. Typically with a not a Bofa, a T-Bow setup, you're never going to see a teleport, but yet here we are, right? That's okay though. We should be able to get the job done after this crystal. The whip damage on the crystals is actually not too bad. It's just the T-Bow damage on the boss itself, which is a little underwhelming. I gotta imagine that our DPS with this specific range setup probably isn't even better than the Bofa setup. It can't be, right? I mean, like, a full set of crystal is what, like 10% damage to your Bofa? Like, never mind the accuracy and whatnot. There's probably a certain line where your Twisted Bow setup is so bad, your range setup is so bad, that you should probably just opt to use the Bofa, which is what, like 200 mil or less setup, versus the Twisted Bow being well over 1 bill GP at any given time, probably about like 1.5 bill right now. And obviously we don't have things like the Anguish and whatnot, which are huge. Okay, for the Mystic Room, we did bring the Salve, which is also absolutely free. That's definitely not something you would give up in a Twisted Bow rebuild because, I mean, you can't sell it. You can't alch it. Or actually, maybe you can alch it, but it probably doesn't even really give you anything. 35 minutes at Mystics. Yeah, this is definitely pretty slow now. But you know what? I think I touched on it earlier. The actual time to beat is 1 hour and 10 minutes. That's one Mystic down. Let's make our way across the room. Let's see if we can just aggro this one Mystic and not the other. We'll stay on this side for right now. Get it. Corner safe spotted. So far, so good. And, of course, the moment we got it set up for the corner safe spot, the green one just comes sneaking over. It's like it knew, you know? Not a problem, though. We just get it set up shop over here. Obviously, with something like the Twisted Bow, our hits, when they do hit, are usually pretty high, so that still feels nice. But because of how scuffed our gear is, it's really the accuracy that takes the biggest hit, I would say. It feels like we're hitting so many zeros. I don't know. I could be wrong, though. Alright, heading into the dreaded Muttadile room. Let's get that axe. And yeah, our defenses aren't looking too great here, so hopefully we have enough brews. And we'll be sure to keep our health as high as possible. I think the Trident is probably our better option here. Definitely not the Twisted Bow to deal with the baby dial. And yeah, we're probably not going to be whipping it either, so it's going to have to be the Trident. And we are actually hitting. Max hit right there even. It's down to 56%. Okay, that felt like a pretty fast tree cut. I don't know. But on to the baby doll. Let's dump our specs right now, because we should be able to get everything back before Ohm. I think I'm going to stick with the Trident here. Did try to whip it, and yeah, it wasn't really doing much there, was it? Flick into our black D'hide just to get what we can in terms of defense, because we know Mystic Robes are absolutely paper. I'm pleasantly surprised right now, honestly, although we still have to deal with the Muttadile. But things have been going pretty smoothly. Our brew situation still looking great. One more mage hit. Switch back to range. Very nice. Almost done, and we're hitting. We're absolutely hitting right now. That is the Muttadile room completed. And I gotta say, that felt pretty lucky. Chiming in post-commentary here, just to say, from this point on, there's not really going to be any commentary, because as I made my way to Ohm and started gearing up, I realized I dropped my glory somewhere. You might have caught it in the middle of watching this, but in the moment I didn't know, and I didn't know where I dropped the glory specifically, so I actually had to go looking for that. And then after that, I actually had to AFK mid-raid. So I was gone for a couple of minutes here, but not to worry, we did eventually make our way into Ohm and finish this raid, but the rest of this video is not going to have any commentary, unfortunately. In fact, right now you can see, yeah, I'm like, oh, where's my glory? I'm looking for it right now. And then after this, I AFK, and then I come back and we do Ohm. Basically, when I went AFK, I muted my mic, and then when I came back, I forgot to unmute.